that the Kotak Committee on Corporate Governance has submitted its report some time ago, and it's still not clear what the general impression of that report is. The government has rejected half of its 24 recommendations. Corporate India, which claims better governance, commitment to governance, is not enthusiastic. What you believe is at the core of the reactions to this committee, and is it good for India? Is it not so good for India? Who will it benefit? Who will it not benefit? And where do you see any action coming for this from, if at all? Is the spirit missing? Is it much more in the letter that, it may pass the test of the letter but not really the spirit?
Walk the talk, there it's not an issue. So you would have to divide corporate India into two parts. Where you want to walk the talk, you don't have an issue any which way. The other is where it's more in letter and not in spirit. Now with these recommendations, which if you really see, in my opinion, are more incremental. I mean, like moving from a 1/3 independent director limit to a half. These are more incremental. Ground reality will not change. If independence was a problem in those second half of corporates, it will continue to be. So if those 1/3 independent directors were part of an extended family who were brought on board, the half will also be pretty much be in the same league. Even if you put out their profiles, like it also talks of putting up the profiles and the qualifications of the independent directors on wherever, and even if you put up the profiles, it's again going to be only in letter, because you are just putting up something which is factual. I mean, even if you take it globally, despite similar rules, I mean, today's India's corporate governance from a rules issue is more or less at par with the rest of the world.
Global rules.
Yet you have issues across the world also. So you will continue to have the same similar issues here, because not all people are the same.
Basically, this is an evolution, not a revolution like it's been reported.
Nice.
So the mechanisms are there. They're already there. The systems are there. What they have done in the Kotak committee is, with all the vigilism, the challenge is, again, it boils down to the two basic words that we all talk about, try to live with, but end up not living with it. That's what Hemant also touched upon in terms of ethics, transparency and truth. Now, because that is in question, these reports after reports, committees after committees going back to 90s are being challenged every time. So the whistleblower, no matter how strong you make him, now what you have tried to do in this committee is through the independence of the giving more power to the director, independence, giving him the power to showcase his message by giving reasons for being out and different bodies that are involved. But again, there is always a way out. So if you are truly not committed to running a company the way it is to be run, the whistleblowers will keep whistling. But the challenge will not go away. And unfortunately, after a few years, if not months, we'll have yet another report, because somebody would be frauding even after that. Actually, if you look at the passage of the committees and the passage of the governance, even today, if you talk to the experts, the gold standard still remains the first ever committee, which was the Cadbury's committee. They talked of very simple things. If you look at today's committee report, vis-a-vis 1992 is when Cadbury's committee came forward. They talked of very simple things. They talked of responsibilities, they talked of delivery, they talked of a list which gave compliance. Where you were not complying, you had to report. As simple as that. But because there were people who were always a step ahead, these reports got backward, put in the rear, and more reports have come out. So while whistleblowers' role is critical, but that is not the solution, because if the ownership, the promoter of the company is not well-meaning in order to deliver, these challenges will not go away. You will have some prosecution. The way to prosecute, there is another debate being talked about nowadays, is should these regulations be taken away? Should it be restricted to, say, let's say only 500 companies, and for the rest, let the shareholder value decide the course of action? Rather than people being forced to do, let's unforce that and let the market decide. Look at and a great example as a last comment from my side, talking about the whistleblower that you refer to, is the Uber case. Uber did everything wrong. They paid off hackers, they had insider issues, they had external issues. And what happened to them? They had to get investment from SoftBank, $10 billion, that's been postponed to 2019 at a 30% discount. So that's the other debate. Let the market decide how good you are, rather than keep putting legislations.
Is the lack of response due to just sort of more of the same? If it was more stringent or change the rules, do you think there would be more excitement just because there was a difference? Is this just fatigue for more things of the same kind?
I think people who really want to do don't really need it. That's really the issue. And there's always going to be a pushback from the people who are always going to find a way to challenge it, no matter what you do. And that's why I'm going back to the various committees. Each one has done an outstanding job in their own way. We can debate the plus and minus. But the fact is, the rule breakers will be rule breakers, and there's no way to set it up till you go to the fundamentals of the truth and transparency.
Okay. And if I had to ask you, is there anything in this committee report, 2 or 3 things that you think could actually change the landscape significantly?
Definitely, if I was to say, name 2 or 3 things. One is a very important thing is about the information, the unpublished information, which is today passed on to the promoters, which has been recognized in the report also. Now, I'm alluding specifically to that fact that they are openly talked about it. That means the managements are releasing the information to promoters. So to bring a check, now not the check will come, but at least to bring a check, I think is a hugely positive step.
Right.
The second big step is the whole role of the committee, SEBI committee, the SEBI itself. So SEBI, while they are asking people to do their jobs, the point is they are understaffed, they have too much of load, they can't prosecute anybody. Last year they did about 155 total prosecution, out of which 135 odd were only about insider trading. So they are not going into, unlike SEC, they are not going to the quality of reporting. No bad accounting reported, can it be? They don't work with other bodies, which is really partly the issue why there is so much of resistance. For example, if a company is being raided for tax, do they look into it? No, they don't look into it. There is a turf war.
The interconnectedness.
And the final statement on their own conduct is on the circular of September, which they came out, to my mind, it was a great circular, saying that if there is a negative reporting, you have to straight away report to the SEBI. What happened? Next day it was withdrawn without a reason. Until date, it's not come into place. And the reason that's been cited by the chairman is that the banks need time. I'm sorry, what time you need? Because that's about negative reporting. So, stuff like that. So,
could be.
So I think, again, it's boiling down to the same. So that's a great step. SEBI is understaffed. The separation of duties between the executive and the promoter is a great step. Women directors is a great step. That's close to your heart as well. That's a great step, So I think there are some great suggestion and way forward. Quantification of talking about the accounting profession of ours, the quantification of the qualification. So today there is no quantification. So they have given exceptions of 1 or 2 if it's a notes on accounts or if there is sub judice, but the quantification along with reasons which have to be concurred by the auditor. So some huge positive steps. If I was to say draconian, I won't use that word, but if the things could have been better, for example, even after so much of journey that we have done and we are debating and it's being debated across the country, the fact that we are still asking the board members to be available 50% of your time over a rolling 2-year period. I'm sorry, if you're a committed director, you have got to be 100% like outside India. First, on the other side, we are talking about fees of 5 lakh rupees per annum for the independent director. You will never get a committed independent director. If you want his independence, he has got to be full-time. Outside India, there is, the fees is given to you in advance. Every
like
board meeting it's a job. It's a serious job.
Yeah, it's a job.
So that is it. It's about, the process of appointment is not there. We talk of independence. Are we really independent? That kind of stuff. So a telephone call can get you an entry, whereas outside there are search companies who have a criteria.
Yeah,
so I think those are the things which are, I think, a downside, and they could have been better.
Sai, that brings me right to what I wanted to ask you. Is there anything in this report that could change them from dependent directors to independent directors?
Yeah. So before I specifically respond to that question, I just want to take a step back and provide a little bit more context to the overall report and I think what it's kind of suggested. So one is obviously, I think corporate governance is a constantly evolving thing, and I think when the committee sat down, I think they were looking to see the 2013 Companies Act had been just implemented about 3 years back, and to make that effective, what further changes need to essentially be brought about, and that's why this incremental approach and this evolution rather than revolution kind of approach. But ultimately, if you look at the report in total, I think it's if you ask, is there any single recommendation that really stands out? Probably not. Maybe the one that grabbed the headlines was the separation of the chairman and CEO role. But it's the combination of several recommendations that actually makes this powerful, and that's the way it was ultimately thought through. So for instance, to look at making, say, 2 of the key fiduciaries, which is the independent directors and the auditors, more accountable. So what are the combination of changes that need to be brought about? And also the other thing was the current environment in which I think some of these things are happening. So for instance, even after the report got released, I think the amount of focus that's actually come on independent directors, their responsibilities, the whole debate on public interest, in fact about directors' personal assets getting attached and all of that, I think that's changing the way independent directors are looking at their role on the board. And when the committee actually debated this thing, I think what was felt is that today, yes, companies tick the box to say that yes, I have 1/3 independent directors, etc. But are they truly independent? Are they essentially able to voice their opinion? So these are the kind of questions that were looked at and kind of addressed. So there was this whole question of board interlocks. So it's like you scratch my back, I scratch your back, you be an independent director on my board, I'll be an independent director on yours, etc. So those are the kind of issues that were kind of identified and plugged. So they have kind of broadened the definition of independence itself to kind of curb some of those issues. The second is, again, Hemant raised the point in terms of the 50% independent directors. Again, that's an important one because in a sense, 1/3 independent directors in the room, are they able to voice their opinion freely? Probably not. Getting them to a 50% certainly tilts things. So for instance, they need to vote on a tough resolution, they have the ability to vote against it. And bringing that lead independent director is again a very important thing, because a lot of times, again, looking at the Indian cultural situation, not every independent director feels comfortable voicing issues sitting in that boardroom, because he then gets associated with that viewpoint. But you have the ability, and what the committee encourages is that independent directors have executive sessions, that is, meet without management or executive directors more often, and identify issues that need to be tabled, and get the lead independent director to actually table those issues. So in a sense, then it becomes a collective voice which then gets heard in the boardroom rather than actually voice of single independent directors. Again, if you look at this thing on asking for women independent directors, so it's actually not a question of, a lot of people confuse getting women on board with actually increasing diversity and essentially saying that women empowerment and all. It's not actually about women empowerment. It's actually about improving governance. Because when you, again, studies have shown that when you actually have a woman in the boardroom dynamics change.
The diversity issue is the same point.
So it's about, so it's about changing the dynamics in the boardroom, making sure that when you have women on the board, the interests of various stakeholders get better addressed. Sensitive issues don't get brushed under the carpet. You tend to have a more fair kind of discussion on these kind of issues, etc. So it's a combination of these elements which essentially is going to improve this. And the one other big change, I think, which is really going to move the needle on governance is actually SEBI's commitment towards improving monitoring and enforcement. Because today, if you look at it, like was earlier said, I think our rules are among the best in the world. But if you look at level of compliance, I think it is far lower than many other parts of the world. And it is because there's no one monitoring and no one coming with enforcement action that that level of compliance is low. So it's more a tick in the box. But with SEBI looking seriously to kind of enhance their monitoring and enforcement capabilities, I think you will actually see the level of compliance actually starting to change here.
I think your last point, Sai, that if SEBI does really get much better at monitoring and implementation, then the rules are already adequate for there to be much better compliance going forward.
I'm asking a question, if my son, I'm a promoter and my son is married to the daughter of the auditor, it's a conflict. If my daughter was to be married to the son of auditor, will it be a conflict? Think about it and read about it.
Thank you. You brought gender to the center of this debate.